Snow in May. Let that sink in for a moment. Not in the mountains. Not in the far north where you might expect it. In southern Ontario. Light flakes falling in the early morning hours of Thursday, dusting the same streets where people were mowing their lawns just 2 weeks ago. Sub-zero temperatures creeping in overnight while the calendar insists we are well into spring. Frost advisories threatening gardens that were already planted in the optimistic belief that winter was finally behind us. And here is the thing. This is not a one-day anomaly. This is not a freak occurrence that will be gone by the weekend. This pattern, this stubborn relentless cold that has locked itself over the eastern half of the country, is not finished with us yet. Good morning. This is your national forecast for Thursday, May the 7th. And before this broadcast is over, you are going to understand exactly why your thermometer is lying to you this week, what is causing it, and when, finally, it is going to change. Let us start where the most urgent story is unfolding right now, and that is across the Maritimes, where a soggy and genuinely miserable Thursday is already underway. That cold front that spent the earlier part of this week tearing through southern Ontario and battering Quebec with flooding rains and violent thunderstorms has been on the move. It does not stop. It does not rest. It simply tracks east, picking up new moisture, reorganizing, and delivering its payload to the next region in line. And today, Thursday, that region is the Maritimes. All 3 maritime provinces are seeing widespread rain this morning. New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island. Rain across all of them, and not a light refreshing spring rain either. This is the heavy, persistent, wind-driven kind that soaks through your jacket in minutes and turns unpaved roads into rivers. And speaking of wind, this is not just a rain event for the Maritimes today. As that front pushes through the region, it is dragging significant wind with it. Wind speeds ranging between 50 and 75 km per hour are being recorded and forecast across the region as the front moves through. Those are not gentle breezes. Those are winds that bring down tree branches, knock out power lines, and make driving feel genuinely precarious, especially on exposed coastal roads and elevated terrain. If you are in the Maritimes this morning and you do not have to be outside, the case for staying inside is a compelling one. The one brief moment of optimism in the Maritimes today comes from Fredericton, which is managing to hold on to a temperature of around 17 degrees. Not a bad number at all given what the rest of the region is dealing with. But that is the exception. Across most of the Maritimes today, temperatures are sitting at seasonal or slightly below seasonal levels. You are not going to feel warm out there, and the wind is going to make sure of it. Now, in terms of what comes next for the Maritimes, there is a mixed picture over the coming days. The rain and wind will ease as we push through Thursday and into Friday, with a few lingering showers possible late in the day Friday. Saturday brings a new low-pressure system moving through the region, and that is going to produce more widespread rain. Not the ideal forecast for a Saturday in May. And then just as you start to hope for a dry and pleasant Mother's Day on Sunday, it looks like showers are possible again. It is not the kind of forecast that makes weekend planners happy. But the clearing trend does arrive eventually, and by the time we get into early next week, conditions should begin to improve meaningfully across Atlantic Canada. Now let us head further east, because Newfoundland is dealing with something more significant than just lingering showers today. That same system pushing through the Maritimes is heading straight for the island, and rainfall warnings are already in place around Channel Port aux Basques and across the southwestern areas of Newfoundland. This is not a situation to take lightly. When rainfall warnings are issued for those coastal and southwestern communities, it means significant accumulations are expected, and in terrain that is already saturated from days of unsettled weather. That creates the conditions for localized flooding, runoff, and dangerous road conditions. Eastern Labrador is also caught up in this, with showers extending across that region as the system makes its final push eastward. The entire Atlantic region, from the Bay of Fundy all the way out to the Avalon Peninsula, is dealing with the consequences of a pattern that has been delivering wave after wave of unsettled weather for the better part of a week. There is some relief in sight, and we will talk about that, but for Thursday the message is simple. It is wet, it is windy, and it is going to stay that way. And it is worth noting that amid all this gray and miserable weather, Newfoundland quietly hit a milestone on Wednesday. St. John's reached 20 degrees for the first time since October. The first time in 2026. Gander West also hit 20 degrees on Wednesday. 2 decades of chasing that number through the long cold winter and early spring, and it finally arrived, only to be followed almost immediately by this wet and unsettled pattern. That is Newfoundland weather in a single story. But those warmer days are coming back. They are just taking their time. Now let us cross back to the mainland and talk about Ontario and Quebec, because even though the most dramatic chapter of this week's weather has already moved through, the story is far from over for these two provinces. Southern Ontario woke up this Thursday morning to something that caught a lot of people off guard. Light snow. Not accumulating, not significant in terms of totals, but unmistakably they're on radar, those hints of blue that tell the meteorologist's eye exactly what is falling from the sky. Light flakes in the early morning hours, temperatures dipping to sub-zero in a handful of locations overnight. And here is what makes this more than just a novelty. We are past the average date of the last frost across southern Ontario. Most people with gardens, with outdoor plants, with seedlings they have been nurturing on window sills all winter and finally moved outside, they have done so under the reasonable assumption that the frost risk is behind them. That assumption is wrong this week. Going into Thursday overnight and into the early hours of Friday morning, frost advisories are possible once again across parts of southern Ontario. If you have tender plants outside, get them in. If you have garden beds that you have already planted, cover them. The frost risk is real and it is not the kind of thing you get a second chance at once the damage is done. Toronto is sitting approximately 6 degrees below seasonal norms right now. 6 degrees. That is not a small departure. That is the difference between a pleasant spring day and a day where you are reaching back into the closet for the coat you thought you had put away until November. Montreal is running about 5 degrees below seasonal. The entire corridor from Windsor to Quebec City is locked in a pattern that feels less like May and more like early April at best, late March at worst. What is causing all of this? The answer lies in the upper atmosphere, in a pattern that has been remarkably stubborn and persistent over the past week and a half. There is an upper-level low-pressure system sitting over the eastern part of the country, and it is acting like a refrigerator door left open. It is drawing cold air down from the north, keeping cloud cover locked in, fueling these waves of unsettled weather, and refusing to budge. Upper-level lows of this type can be remarkably resistant to change. They become self-reinforcing, maintaining their own cold environment and blocking the warmer air masses that would normally be pushing north by this point in the season. The result is what you are seeing. Single-digit highs across northern Ontario. Snow in southern Ontario. Frost advisories in regions that should be well past them. And a general sense of meteorological betrayal felt by anyone who dared to believe that spring had truly arrived. Through Thursday afternoon and into Friday across Ontario and Quebec, passing showers will continue. There is no dramatic new system arriving, just that same persistent background of unsettled conditions, cloud cover, and the occasional shower moving through. Saturday, however, brings a more significant development. A low-pressure system is going to move through the region on Saturday, and that is going to bring more widespread rain. Winds around 30 to 40 kilometers per hour. Temperatures remaining below what you would hope for in mid-May. Northern Ontario deserves a specific mention here because the numbers up there are genuinely striking. Single-digit highs. That is the forecast for much of northern Ontario through Thursday. A few flurries are also possible across parts of the north, adding to the sense that winter is simply refusing to acknowledge the calendar. The winds are not particularly strong across the north today, which provides some small mercy, but the cold and the gray are going to be the defining characteristics of the day from Sudbury to Thunder Bay and beyond. Now let us go west, because when you cross into Saskatchewan and Manitoba, you start to see the beginning of a transition. And when you get all the way to Alberta and British Columbia, you enter an entirely different world. Manitoba is coming out of what has been a rough stretch. The province has been caught under the influence of that same upper-level trough that has been causing all the trouble to the east, and as a result it has been dealing with cloud, cool temperatures, and unsettled conditions including some flurries. But there is improvement on the horizon. Temperatures are starting to gradually climb as we move through the latter part of this week and into the weekend. A few showers will push into southwestern Manitoba on Friday, but overall the province is moving in the right direction. Saskatchewan sits in a fascinating in-between position. The upper-level ridge that is keeping the west so warm and dry still has some influence over the province, and that translates to a bit of sunshine and temperatures that are starting to feel more seasonable. It is not the dramatic warmth of Alberta and British Columbia, but it is a noticeable improvement over what Manitoba and Ontario are dealing with. As we move into Friday, a small pulse of showers will push through, but otherwise the picture for Saskatchewan over the coming days is reasonably encouraging. And then there is Alberta. 7 degrees above normal in Calgary. 5 degrees above normal in Edmonton. If you are in Ontario reading that and feeling a surge of very specific jealousy, that is entirely understandable. Alberta is sitting under the warm side of that upper-level ridge, soaking up sunshine, enjoying temperatures that actually feel like the month of May is supposed to feel. After the long winter, after the cold spring that has gripped so much of the country, Alberta is cashing in early and doing it convincingly. British Columbia remains in a world of its own. Lytton hit 33 degrees on Tuesday. 33 degrees. The hottest spot in the entire country that day by a significant margin. Temperatures across the BC interior remain warm, with lots of sunshine continuing through Thursday and into the coming days. And while that sounds wonderful, and for anyone stepping outside on a Tuesday afternoon in Lytton it certainly felt wonderful, the context around that warmth is deeply concerning. The wildfire season in British Columbia has already gotten off to a fast and dangerous start. The province is dry. It is hot. The moisture that normally provides some buffer through the early part of the season simply has not arrived in the quantities needed. And the forecast is not offering much relief. There is not a lot of rain in the outlook for British Columbia over the coming days. And critically, where rainfall is showing up in the models, it is largely falling in areas that are not the ones facing the most acute fire risk. The interior, where the heat has been most intense and where the fire danger is most elevated, remains largely dry. The pattern that has dominated all week, that upper-level ridge anchored over Western Canada, is going to start to weaken slowly as we move into next week. Meteorologists are watching for what is called a more zonal flow to emerge, which would represent a significant shift in the overall pattern. When that happens, the extreme heat and dryness across British Columbia should begin to ease. Some of that warmth that has been hoarded in the west will start to redistribute eastward, and southern Ontario and southern Quebec will finally start to see temperatures climb back toward and then above seasonal norms. That is the light at the end of the tunnel. But it is still several days away. So here is where we stand as we close out this forecast for Thursday, May the 7th. Half of this country is cold, gray, and wet. Southern Ontario had snow this morning. Frost advisories are possible again overnight. Toronto and Montreal are running several degrees below where they should be at this point in the season. The Maritimes are being battered by rain and wind. Newfoundland is under rainfall warnings. Northern Ontario is measuring daily high temperatures in single digits. The other half of this country is warm, dry, and facing a wildfire situation that is growing more serious with each passing day. British Columbia hit 33 degrees this week. Alberta is 7 degrees above normal. And the rain that could ease the fire danger is stubbornly refusing to fall where it is needed most. 2 Canadas this week. Divided by the Rockies and the Saskatchewan border. 1 too cold and too wet. 1 too hot and too dry. And the pattern responsible for all of it finally showing the very earliest hints that it might, eventually, be willing to change. Hold on to that. Because better days are coming. They are just not here yet. Stay safe, stay aware, and check for any frost advisories or weather warnings in your area before you head to bed tonight. This is your national forecast for Thursday, May the 7th. We will have your updated forecast coming up. Do not go anywhere.